What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Good Theory, where we dive into the depths of mental health, resilience, and the triumph over adversity. Today, we are honored to have such an amazing guest. We got frontman, lead singer of Killswitch Engage and Times of Grace, a proponent and advocate for mental health awareness, a powerful force in the metal music industry, and one of the most down-to-earth and humble human beings, Jesse Leach. Jesse, thanks for being here, brother.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. Appreciate that.
Of course.
I will do my best to live up to it.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, one thing I did want to point out as a fun fact is a year from this month, a year ago in February, was when I was on your podcast, Stoke the Fire, with you and your buddy Matt. And I had a very profound experience going through it, knowing that at the same time I was also in a very, very dark place in life. And to be honest, in the beginning when I was asked to be on it, I was a little hesitant, and I wasn't sure what I would say aside from what I've been saying 18 years of my professional career as a fighter. So I was like, shit, man, I mean, it's fucking Jesse Leach. It's an opportunity to finally connect with him, because I've always connected with you and resonated, on a level with your lyrics and your music. I was like, let's see what happens. I put myself in that journey and, went in. And for any of you guys who watched the episode, you'll see it took a toll midway through that episode, where I was in the first half. Your, questions about fighting, the usual about, my career. I reached a culmination of that part of the conversation where I said, you know what, this is bullshit. None of it is real. And in a nice way of putting it, I just kind of put myself out there and was honest and said that I'm not doing good. I'm not in a good place.
You broke the autopilot. I could see there was like a switch that kind of went off. Matt and I both picked up on it, and that's when shit got real.
Yeah.
And that was when the interview, to me, conversation got really good. And that was a turning point in that conversation. And I can see that it's been a turning point in your life because of that. I'm not saying we're responsible for it, but to be able to witness you drop your guard and come clean like that was amazing.
I can't tell you how much after that experience. I mean, I could literally walk you through, the mental process of it. Once we were done, I sat there and I was immediately like shitting on myself. What the fuck am I doing? Like, why am I talking about these things? This is not my normal. This is not the image of strong that I've put out there, all these years throughout my entire career. Like, what was I thinking? And then each time I was getting a message through social media, I was flinching and worried that it was something that was going to be hateful or, laughing at me. UFC fighter, someone who's considered, in one of the most masculine fields.
Yeah.
Trying.
Yeah.
And every time I flinched, I'd open a message. One by one, they were rolling in.
I remember, and you were hitting me up. You were hitting me up. That was
along
great.
The lines of
real time.
Yeah. I was just getting these messages that were just rolling in one by one along the lines of, hey, I needed to hear that, or I never knew that. So there was definitely a profound experience for me that had been there. But in any case, I just wanted you to share more, I guess, about your journey, because obviously there was a lot that comes into not just what you do in your career as a singer and a musician, but there's so much more to you as a human being. I feel like I had the opportunity to experience that, but I'd like for you to maybe share a little bit about your journey. What was it like before you, got into music?
So before I got into music, I was actually into martial arts, ironically. I worshipped Bruce Lee, and, to me, martial arts was everything. And I even competed, and that was my whole thing. And then two kids in my neighborhood would show up to, when I would fight, or they would show up to, like, I also played volleyball at the time. They would show up and, hassle me from the sidelines. And they were punk rocker guys. And long story short, they introduced me to punk and hardcore. And I became absolutely obsessed. The band Minor Threat became my religion. And the idea of the fact that you could do that type of music, which I'd never heard before, prior to that was Metallica, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, those types of bands, which I thought were cool, but the ferocity and then the lyrical content of hardcore music is really what got me. And I think being the son of a preacher man, I've always gravitated towards message. Even though I don't subscribe to a lot of the beliefs that I was brought up on, to me there's always been that desire to help and to bring light into a dark place. So that's kind of what it all came from. And I just got obsessed. And I wouldn't take no for an answer, no matter what I did in my life, whatever jobs I did, the pressure to go to college because my dad is, a very learned man. I just knew that wasn't for me. I tried it. I just knew it wasn't for me. And 3 or 4 days a week, I'd be in the nightclubs. My parents would drop me off. My mom was a big supporter. She just wanted me to be happy. So they would drop me off at, Club Baby had the living room in Providence, and I would go see goth bands, I'd see metal bands, I'd see punk bands, ska bands, just anything. I was obsessed. Like, for some reason, music changed. I think it was the underground is really what got me, because mainstream, it only gives you so much. It's cool, but when you discover there's people who have no limits, whether that be stylistically or lyrically or even the way they present themselves, to me that was just fascinating. Yeah. Oh, you can do that. Or I'd hear something that was simple and be like, oh, I could probably do that. When you look at bands like, again, the Metallicas, the Pearl Jams at the time, they just seemed larger than life. They seemed like inaccessible. Where punk and hardcore was like people my age, a little older, doing fairly simple music with a powerful message. And that's where it all started for me. And from that point on, it was like I joined this band. We played our first show at my friend's Halloween party in 1993. I still have the cassette tape. It's terrible. But I was addicted at that point. It was like people cared about what I was doing. I lost my voice, and people thought it was the coolest thing, and that was it. I had the buzz. And from that point on, I would make my own flyers. I'd go through high school. People always called me freak and weirdo because I'd look different. But in the back of my mind, I knew I had a life outside of high school. My friends were older. They were cooler. So that gave me a sense of confidence that it really changed the way that I looked at this little microcosm of high school that felt so enslaving. And the music was my liberation. The music was my way to look outside of this world and say, oh, I got a gig this weekend. I don't care what you think. Call me a freak. Call me this. Call me that. Good luck with your stupid party, drinking beers. I'm going to go stand on stage and make a couple $100 and sing some punk rock. So that was it. Life just shifted. And that was when I was 15, 16. 17 was the first time I had a band called Corinne, ironically, talking earlier. Yes, but and that was a mixture of like hardcore and metal, predating the metalcore was what Killswitch is known for. And blending those styles, again, just different stuff that was not, you couldn't turn on the radio or MTV and find music like that. You had to be in the know. So that sense of this is mine, this is ours, it's our culture, it's our community. And you wouldn't know unless you were there. So that to me is the magic. That's what got me. To this day, I still look back on those days with joy in my heart that I was able and privileged to be a part of that small community that eventually blew up and became, bands like Shadows Fall, Hatebreed, Killswitch Engage, Unearth, like that circle of friends just expanded and expanded. And we had no idea that was going to happen, but the genesis of all that, small little shows in these little clubs on weekends while I was still in high school, that was the buzz.
There seems to be like a component to that, and you said the word when you said community, in the sense of being part of something that kind of almost breaks us free from the mold of, I guess certain things that are confining. Perhaps probably why, although you like maybe some of the mainstream music or certain bands, it was still like it wasn't really touching you in a way that underground music was, because it gives you a sense of closeness to something that is attainable and reachable. And when it comes to during that time in high school, for example, for me, being different was something that I felt was a gift, because where I grew up from was more of a predominantly ghetto, gang banging, drug dealing neighborhood. You know, I moved from shelter to shelter. I lived in Section 8, and, you know, I was living under projects for almost my entire life. So having that thing that took me away from this other thing, from this shit that I felt like I couldn't escape, was my escape. It was my release. So it's almost like you saying, I was, in a way, it relinquished you from, you know, being like, you know, like everyone else, breaking out of this mold. But it's awesome to also hear kind of how that segued into what you do today, you know, to be able to help others as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can relate this with when you find your clique, whether it's, you know, childhood friends or, you know, a team that you're fighting with or a band. To me, it was about, I couldn't relate to a lot of people in normal society. And punk and hardcore introduced me to, and even theater, because I actually did theater before I got into punk and hardcore. That's actually kind of around the same time.
You were in a film.
Yeah, like, and theater kids and stage. I did stage productions for, you know, while I was in high school for young kids. You know, we'd put on like, you know, Babes in Toyland or whatever. And we actually did some weird psychedelic stuff too, because my theater teacher was just a total weirdo. But finding that clique of people who were different, who were from broken families, who were just odd and would be picked on and made fun of, and you band together and you find that there's a realness there that you're not getting. You know, you look at, again, back to high school, the jocks, the people who were popular. I never really related with that. And it became a point of pride, like you said, being different was good, where I would kind of chuckle. I'm like, I'm not living that weird sort of like fake life of like the accolades that society gives you. You have to do this, you have to do that. To me, it was like finding a whole other world and then meeting people who were becoming successful at being, you know, artists. I know this guy who was a graffiti writer, and he eventually became a designer, like found his way through from the thing that he loved that wasn't handed to him. It was something you earned that was nothing to do with college or any of that stuff.
And that's more yourself.
Yeah, and that's what excited me so much. Is like there's possibilities. I don't have to be the thing that I've been told I have to be.
Yeah,
I can be something completely different.
That's awesome. I mean, I relate it to, for example, with the school, and I teach, you know, and Meek and I say, you know, often that what brought me into the gym for me to start training was this brokenness that I felt I had. And that's also what brings people together. It's a band of brothers of broken people. But through that, there's strength in it, because, you know, there's always strength in numbers, and you relate to one another, you know. So we always say we're in the business of the broken.
Love that.
And through that, it's like, you know, yeah, call me a misfit, call me different. You laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same. You know, so through that, I'm more in touch now with my sense of individuality. I am more closer to me finding, I may not know today or tomorrow or years from now, but still closer than you are to finding my path, my true path, and what I'm meant to do on this earth.
And then what you can do with that, which is what I think I've done, is you take that energy and you look at people who now are living, you know, for example, some of those people in high school that picked on me, they're living a fairly mundane life and they're having their troubles. And they reach out to me via social media and come to my shows and like, oh, my husband's a fan. The girl that used to like pick on me and call me a freak. My husband's a fan. Can you please give me an autograph? So, and I chuckle, and it's like, it's funny how the tables turn, but you can use your gifts and use the healing that you've found to help people like that out, to help the common person. You know, because when you're pursuing art or you're pursuing a passion that is off the beaten path, like fighting, like music, art, whatever, you see the world differently, and you're able to grasp concepts and things that you wouldn't normally have if you just had a 9-to-5 job. If you had a job as, I don't know, someone in the corporate world, you see the world differently, and you can use those points of view to help liberate other people so they can see the world differently, because it doesn't have to be this black and white thing that society feeds you. There's all shades of gray in there, and to me, that's where the freedom is
gray.
Yeah, and like to turn it around and let people know you don't have to be what they tell you to be. And as you get older, that liberation is just, it become a purpose-filled life where you just, I feel the need in my lyrics to help liberate other people so they can see the world differently. because that could save a life. You know, you've been down that path where darkness creeps in and you feel like there's no way out. I know people like that. They hate their job. They hate their family life. Like, they've got these issues. And when you introduce them to a concept or a ideology that shows that there's another way, that can break those chains. That can change somebody's mindset, and they can find joy, a renewed joy of life, when you pull off the shackles of what is expected of you and walk that path that is less trodden.
So you talk about darkness often, and assuming there was a predominant sense of that in your own world at one point. There's evolutions to the human condition, and there's evolutions you yourself have gone through as well. You've spoken a little bit about healing, which is something you mentioned not long ago. What was a point in your timeline where you began to heal yourself? Was it one specific moment? Was it gradual?
Yeah, it was gradual. You know, I was in a pretty terrible marriage for close to 18 years. And I feel like sometimes when you're in abusive and dark relationships, you might not realize it while you're in it. But while I was in it, I found ways to slowly heal myself from, you know, the dishonesty and the lies and all the things that went along with this other person. And to me, it was retreating into nature. I discovered, by accident, honestly, I was recording the First Times of Grace record. And where the studio is in Massachusetts, behind the studio is woods and like a river, which I would spend a lot of time writing. And, you know, when I have writer's block or if I was having trouble with the take, I would get out of the studio and walk into the woods and just sit and figure out what I'm going to write. And there was a rusted, broken down, huffy 10-speed bicycle there, like just yellow and black, just looked like some kid from the 80s just left it there. And I saw that, and I was like, bet. I'm going to take this bike. I'm going to fix it like I used to do back in the day. You know, neighborhood kids, when I lived in the ghetto in Philly, we used to get junk parts and make bikes, and it was like this thing that we did that I loved. So I took this bike and I redid it, and I just started riding. And I remember that first time I took the bike out on the bike path. I used to live in Yonkers, New York, and right along Yonkers all the way up into Westchester County is a bike path, like an old rail trail where they pulled the rails off and you can bike there. And I remember that first day getting on that bicycle and riding and listening to music and just laughing. Like I felt like a kid again. I felt so liberated. And then crying and then laughing and then crying. And that started my love affair with cycling, where when I'd have dark times or dark days on weekends, I would get on that bike and I would go. And just further north. And I eventually made it up to the Catskill Mountains on my bike. So we're talking 70-something miles. So I would just take day trips, and I just kept doing that. And that just turned into the best mental health therapy I found, was just getting on that bike and going. And that was early on. So getting through that relationship, cycling was the thing. It's like getting out in nature and cycling. It's like I would find joy that I would not feel anywhere else in my life. And then from there, just hiking, just being in the mountains, nature, which eventually, fast forward to how I live now, I live in nature. You walk out my front door, there's a big river there, there's mountains, I see hawks, and just I'm surrounded by that thing that I need to keep me sane. So it's part of my regular routine now, effortlessly, when I'm home.
Well, a big part of being able to also change certain, I guess, circumstances in your life has a great deal to do with, your environment. You can't really change yourself unless the environment around you is conducive to that change.
Including people, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We were talking earlier about places where we can go that we kind of just let go and we detach, and we're talking about bikes. And it's just, there's just this, as you're talking, it reminds me, I ride as well. And that's probably one of the only times that I feel a sense of where almost like a oneness that I have. But it's funny because in order for me to feel that, I have to have a sense of danger involved. And that's why when I'm riding a bike,
the buzz.
Oh man, it puts you in touch with like this inner nature to us. I don't know why. I don't know if that's something maybe you want to touch on. Why is it sometimes the the imminent threat or the sense of danger to something also kind of puts us more in touch with who we are as a human.
I think everybody's different with that. You know, my brother, for example, who is, you know, ex-military, like extremist, firefighter, he always looked for the adrenaline, the near-death stuff to get him going. I think for me, it was a little less that, but, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about our ancestors that would ride horses, you know, and getting out and hunting and all those things that are tied to our ancestry. And that's another thing I've discovered with nature as well, is looking back to my heritages, whether that be, you know, the Highland Scot, the quote unquote Viking heritage that I have, the Native American heritage. I look back on, and all of us have this. Our ancestors would gather around a fire. They would have to hunt and survive. So all those things, the survival instinct, the near death, we are used to that. We're used to going out every day and having to survive and hunt and kill things that could potentially kill us, whether it be bear or... So I look at that a lot, and I think we're living so detached in our little homes with our heat and air conditioning and, you know, microwaves and, yeah, just you strip that all away, and we need excitement. We need thrills to remind us of who we are. Rewilding is a thing I hear a lot with guys, you know, going on men's retreats like Sacred Sons, friends of ours. It's important to get back in touch with your inner warrior, if you will. And I think that really helps regulate the mind. And I think a reason why a lot of people have mental issues, whether it be anxiety or depression, is we've lost touch with our inner self, our inner wild. And that's why, to me, nature, or, you know, driving up fast on a motorcycle, getting that adrenaline, for me, hiking, you need it. Everybody needs it. And we got to get away from all these machines and magnets and things that are draining our life force. And, you know, walk barefoot out on a cold stream. Like, there's nothing like that in the world. I recommend that anybody do that. Just getting out and being wild again and remembering that's where we all come from.
Were you always spiritual?
Always.
Yeah.
I was raised in it, you know, raised by a minister in the Christian faith. But that was my gateway. I knew it wasn't the end-all, be-all. I knew that when I sat in that pew and listened to the organ music drawl on, that wasn't it. It was the gateway, and it made me believe in that there is a God, there is something bigger than us. But I didn't find it there. I would always find it out in nature, even as a young kid. You know, I lived for 2 years out on a farm in Wisconsin because my dad would travel, going to Bible college, starting a new church. Like, we would move every 3 or 4 years. We were just moving, and I had to make new friends or not make new friends. In my time, when I would escape by myself and go out on these like 300 acres of farmland, walking through cornfields, going out in the woods, that's when I started to feel a sense of I'm not alone. That feeling that people were saying I should get in the church, I got it out there instead. And that's when I was like, my wheels started turning. And you look at the forbidden things. When you're raised Christian, it's like there's good and there's evil. You know, you can't dabble in pagan. You can't dabble in like witchcraft. What was that all about? Like all these things that were like off limits. I was like, well, what is that about?
Yeah.
Where's the truth in that? Shamanism, you know, like psychedelic mushrooms, like all these things that were forbidden. When I started to dip into them and look into them, I was like, oh, that's why. I get why they're forbidden, but man, that's a gateway to expanding your mind and seeing the world through completely different eyes.
Yeah.
And that became my new search for spirituality, what was forbidden to me, and predominantly like that pagan culture that, again, relating back to where we all came from, pre-Christian, that ancient sort of warrior, close to nature thing. That is now my church. The mountains, the streams, the deserts. That's when I find I'm closest to what I believe is a great spirit, is God.
I think too, part of being human is also it's a very common thing. People want to know and always be in the know. And I think there's an unknowing as well, and we are for some reason repelled by the unknowing, whether we have proof of existence of things, whether it's religious, you know, whether it's beliefs that you have in life. There is no black and white, you know. A lot of it, there's nuances to life that bring about curiosity. And when there's more curiosity that comes from our mind and from our spirit, it drives us to actually fulfill more of life I was having a conversation with one of the guys on the team, Mike or Ray. We were talking about, mortality. The fact that, we sometimes encounter this concept of death. We know it's coming, but we never quite embraced it. We always push it off. We know it's coming. We don't know when. We don't know how. But there's just a beauty to also knowing the sense of mortality. And I think going back to what we're talking about with why do we feel more alive when it comes to, certain things, because we have to have that danger to it. It brings about more life to us because we feel that we're that closeness to mortality. I got it tattooed on my collarbone as a reminder, memento mori. Life is fragile, life is short, it goes by fast, just live every single day. But until that day happens, I'm always going to be curious about death. I'm always going to be curious about life. But I think that curiosity diminishes as we get older. And therefore we lose life as well. Our life force gets smaller because we no longer have curiosity in life.
I like that. Wonderment. I think that's the biggest thing that people lack is wonderment, which is why, and I don't do it as much as I used to, but, I mentioned psychedelic therapy. I believe psychedelic therapy changed my life. And I'm not talking about, tripping face and like seeing the Dancing Bears and Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. Like, that's cool if you want to do that. But microdosing, sort of reopening my eyes to the wonderment that I had when I was a kid that I kind of lost along the way. And again, I don't actively do that as much as I used to, but that was sort of like the transition of my life to realizing that I needed to wonder more. Yeah. And speaking of death, I learned to not fear death. I don't fear death. I truly don't. But you know what I do fear? Losing people. The other side of the coin is like, how do you live with someone? Like, I have both my parents alive. I love them dearly. When they go, when one of them goes, I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. But if it were me facing my own mortality, I'm like, onwards to Valhalla. Let's go. Yeah. Let's do it. I'm not afraid to die. But that can be selfish too, because, I don't want to leave Purple, my partner, behind, or my brother or my sister. Like, so I oftentimes, when I'm on those situations, because traveling, I've been in situations where I could do this crazy thing and it would be a lot of fun, but maybe I should reconsider because God forbid I die. So the fear that I have isn't death itself. It's the love that I have for the people that would lose me. And I think it's an interesting thing to wrestle with. But getting back to wonderment, I think if we all had more wonderment like we did when we were kids, the world would be such a better place. Because, when I'm traveling, I'll pass people in the street. And I do this all the time. I'm like, I wonder what their story is. So that wonderment doesn't have to just be within yourself or with mortality. It could be about all the little stories that are walking around you, which gives you a sense of compassion for people. And it levels the playing field too, where we say this in Stoke the Fire. We have so much more in common as human beings than we do differences. In the society we live in now, whether you're talking about wars, political ideology, left versus right, conservative versus liberal, to me that's a farce. That is put in place by the powers that be to keep us divided, because if we are divided, we're easier to rule, we're easier to conquer, we're inner bickering, while all these things around us, these clandestine activities are happening to pull the strings on us. And that's how society works. And part of being counterculture, part of being in that clique of people who were like, you don't have to live this way, that mindset set me off on a revolutionary thought. And at the basis of all that is love and compassion and wonderment. And I think that's the secret to living a fulfilled life, and also to being revolutionary minded. It's so important. Love is our most powerful tool, because connected to that is all these beautiful things we're talking about, life, living it to the fullest. All that stuff is connected to love. And the one thing that the powers that be, and I say that loosely because I don't want to sound like a whatever, detaching our love from each other and allowing us to be sort of interfighting at all times, that is when society is in a downward spiral. And I got news for you. That's exactly where we are right now. And I'm fighting against that. My lyrics, the way I live my life, the way I try to treat people, is to counteract that energy of the downward spiral of society.
That comes with having a servant heart as well, and understanding that we are here more for our own purposes. We serve a purpose to others. We have a duty to other people. We come from, tribesmen mentality, and tribes, it's in our DNA still. And that's why, a big part of feeling good and fulfilled when you are part of a community or a support system is because it touches that part of our DNA that always feels, interconnected to a tribe. We all have a job to do and our ability to serve other people. I always say, if you want to make yourself feel better, you're having a shit day and you're down, do something good for someone else.
Yes.
It'll snap you right out of it. Speaking of love, because we're talking a little bit about that and support, what's the importance you think of having a support system and the one that you had during your healing?
Yeah.
Or lack of, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I have a double answer for that. I think, one, yes, you do need a community. You do need, whether it be good friends, whether it be a therapist or a spiritual leader or a teacher, to be able to ask for help or speak on things and get somebody's perspective. All that is very important. It's something I've talked about a lot, like saying you're not okay, speaking up, having that conversation and continuing that conversation, because it doesn't go away. You're never not going to have sadness in your life, depression, anxiety, all these things, they don't just disappear. You live with them and you learn how to manage them. And a lot of the wisdom I've gained is from interacting with people and having that conversation. But on the flip side, what I've been realizing a lot, I don't think people spend enough time alone as well. And I think being truly alone, and I'm not talking about sitting watching TV, I'm not talking about being on your phone, being completely alone out in nature. Again, this is a recurring theme, I can't help it, but nature is there to teach us something. And when you're out there by yourself with no one distracting you, you start to have an inner dialogue and you start to get to know where you are. And I think there's healing in being alone and allowing yourself to be still by yourself. And a lot of people are afraid of that. They avoid it. And I think that you need the conversations, you need the community, you need the support, but you also need to learn how to be alone, because you will grow exponentially when you do that stuff, that type of stuff.
100%. I can't tell you how much I'm a proponent of that, because the alternative to aloneness is, in another way to look at it, is dependency. And then we think that, I could be alone but still be, in this group or with this person in whatever capacity that is, but still have my own sense of, lonesome or oneness. And I think sometimes that's the key right there, is you can't really have oneness with someone else, or to say that, this other person completes me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another thing to be said too is, when you practice being alone, it becomes more and more profound. And when you practice being alone out in nature, I often find that nature, the animals itself, they start to speak to you. And I'm not talking like, the hawk comes down from the sky, it's like, hey buddy, like, no, not that. But if your guard is down and if you're open, you will see signs. They're all over the place. And our ancestors used to talk about that all the time, where the totems and spiritual, your spirit guides, and all, that's real. It's real. It's not something that these people in that tribe did. You can do it right now if you practice the art of going out and allowing yourself to be open. And I've had amazing experiences with animals that speak to me. But it's, when I say speak, it's not an auditory thing. It's something that you can just pick up on. It's a spiritual thing. Anything from a bird to, watching ants do what they do, like I had a moment in Costa Rica where we're on a trail and I'm just watching these ants carry, leaf cutter ants carry these things. And it was just this mind blowing moment. And I wasn't on anything. I was sober, of like, seeing this community work. And that just kind of struck a chord with me. And I think those messages are everywhere in nature. And it's super important, to be in touch with that, especially if you live in a city. You're so far away from the way we used to live, this disharmonious life that we live. The fact that you look up in the sky and can't see shooting stars in the Milky Way, and that sense of smallness and humility that you get when you're out in nature, all that stuff is so important to growth. Yes. And it all ties through with spirituality. Yeah. I think that's why there's a lot of people who just don't believe in anything anymore, because why would you? You're distracted by everything. The fact you've got four walls around you means that you're not seeing the bigger picture. And I mean that metaphorically as well as literally. So it's very important to, again, I'm going to just say it again, rewild yourself, because there's so much wisdom to be gained by doing that type of stuff.
There's so much energetic dissonance.
Yes.
Because of technology, because the era that we live in. We live in a very fast-tracked, knowledge-ridden, era where literally you have education and knowledge at our fingertips, which can be used for good, but unfortunately, human nature, recourses that for the bad, because that's 90% of humans.
Or just stupid things, like on the internet. Yeah. But some of that stuff is great.
Leave that up for interpretation.
Yeah.
But we all know the deal, with having that power, so to speak, at the fingertips of, forget adults even, just it starts young. It just does not give them a chance of freedom. It's like one of my favorite movies is The Matrix. It's it's just getting at, we're literally in a form of that in of itself, is people are just being born as batteries to power this wheel, this system that we live in now without even knowing we're living in it. That is the beauty of the Matrix. Now that's why the power of oneness also helps you to get plugged out of the Matrix.
Yes.
Unplug. And when you do, like we were saying before, how do we help other people? Is educate, give, like what you're saying. And you keep saying, I keep saying this, I keep saying, we need to keep hearing more of that, because that's how we unplug other people.
Yeah. It's repetition. I think, with anything, if you're going to learn how to do something, it doesn't just happen, right? Like if you're training for a fight, if I'm training for a gig, it's repetition. That's how the human mind masters things. And having a spiritual discipline. That's why people who are religious, look, you don't have to be quote unquote religious in an organized religious sense. I respect the fact that people who are that way, Muslims who pray 5 times a day, is it 5 times? Buddhist monks who meditate, Christians who go to church on Sunday, they stick to that schedule because they have an obligation to do it. But when you remove the obligation and you do it for the sense of self-growth, you can do that with anything. Yeah. And it is important. That's why every Kill Switch record, every Times of Grace record, anything I've ever done, name a band, The Weapon, any band I've ever been in, I will always write a song about, anti-racism, unity, freeing your mind, compassion. Those themes will never go away. I'm going to continue to beat you over the head with them because I do think it needs to be impressed upon how important it is. And I feel sometimes that I repeat myself, but I kind of have to,
It takes sometimes 100th time of saying something in a specific way through a specific song under a specific circumstance for the ears to finally listen, I think there's also revolution involved with a lot of what you do, because you do it, revolution through lyrical warfare. You're out there helping others kind of unravel their sense of spiritual self, their spirit, their embodiment of who they truly are, through your music. Now, as an artist, how do you balance, I guess, the fine line between expressing raw emotions and doing what you do and really tapping into like that energy that you have to pass that message on to others, but maintaining a healthy mental state at the same time?
Yeah, still figuring that one out, but I think it really is all about balance. When I'm on tour, I mentioned cycling. I bring a bicycle with me on tour. Yeah. And when we land in a spot, I've already, the night before, been on Google Maps looking for the path that I'm going to go on. And I start to develop these routines of separating. And when you're a performer and you're under the spotlight, and the moment you walk off the bus, there's people waiting that want to talk to you. You've got an obligation. You've got a sound check. You got press. You got interviews. You got to eat at a certain time because you don't want to get reflux. I had this really crazy, rigid schedule when I'm on the road, and that can start to drive me a little crazy. So breaking out and doing things like going for a long bike ride or a walk, or I'll even go to an art museum and spend 4 hours there by myself just looking at pieces of art. And it's a matter of knowing how to preserve yourself, how to find quiet when you're in a chaotic world. And I think that's a metaphor for existence. And I take that home with me as well, but I find it's a lot easier at home because of where I live. But I think anybody needs to find that disconnect. If you're a creative person, the muse that drives you, the heavy message that I bring to people can be exhausting. Because on stage, I'm not, I would say 99% of the time, I'm not on autopilot. When I say that lyric, I'm imagining a thing, a moment in my life. I'm imagining, a situation where that came from. I'm trying to embody it and then put it out there to the audience. I'm actively trying my best to convey that message, not just with my voice, but with my body, my energy. And that gets exhausting. So there are moments when I just need to go away, or when I'm off tour, like the first couple days when I get home from tour, just total shut off, just to balance myself back out.
Yeah.
So as an artist, you need that. It's like you need to rest. You can't just go all the time. If you're not resting, you're not healing, you're not recovering. Mm-hmm. You need to do all of those things. And that way the message and the art doesn't go dull. It doesn't get tired. Trying to keep my art sharp. And that's super important to me. That's why I stopped the partying on the road for the most part. I stopped all that stuff because to me, I wanted to be sharp on stage. I want to make sure that my aim is true. When I sing this song, I'm not 6 shots deep in tequila anymore. I'm maybe a shot here and there. But I love being on stage sober and then maybe have a little glass of wine after. But that moment that I'm on stage, people have come and they've spent good money. They've spent their time and they want something. It's that reciprocation. So that's changed recently for me. And to find the satisfaction that I get when I get off stage, sometimes that's peace enough for me to balance me out, to know that I'm doing something that matters.
We were talking before how balance, like even with fighting, for example, it's such an extreme and such an encompassing sport because it's all of you. It's 100% or nothing. I try to find ways to balance myself out when I'm not fighting. And who I become when I step into that cage is that person that once needed healing. It's like that I'm tapping into that inner child in me and using that energy, that force, that, sadness, the dark parts of, that child inside of me to tap into that every time I step into the cage. I see musicians very similar. I see, a musician who's on stage belching, getting, their lyrics out, looking onto the crowd and just connecting and resonating. It's very hard to explain to the average person who's not been there to have that power to be able to have an impact on others. But there's also, I feel like a therapeutic aspect of that to yourself as well. It is for me with fighting. Every time I go out there, I feel like there's a part of me that's healing somewhat, not maybe fully, but there's a part that goes in there each time I step into that cage. Does it feel the same to you?
Absolutely. And if I go too long, which lately has been the case for the most part, not touring and I'm home too much, I start to go dark. I can't help it. The only way to counteract that is activity, which I've learned, thankfully, over the years. But nothing lights me up like performance. And then the feeling after a performance when I know that I've made my mark and I've done what I'm supposed to do, that feeling of accomplishment. And it's not ego, it's just, that's why I'm alive, is like you said, in service of others. The music on its own, we make a record, we put it out there. That whole process of making it is sort of very looking inside yourself, but also knowing that eventually it's going to be given to somebody else. And, I just finished the new Killswitch record yesterday, and I'm still processing how that feels. But the one thing that I said to myself the moment I screamed that last scream was like, it's no longer mine. And that's a powerful thing, to realize that what you do, that energy you put out as an artist, it can come from you, but I truly believe it's channeled through me. I'm an instrument. And that energy and those songs and those lyrics are now no longer mine. They're part of the collective. And the person who listens to that song and gets these feelings and feels empowerment or feels therapeutically or gets sad because of something I said, that's all part of the process. And that sense of purpose that I get from it, there's nothing like it in the world. Nothing. I can't even begin to tell you. People talk about sex, drugs, all these little things that give you buzzes. There's nothing like the fact that as an artist, especially the type of artist that I am, I need to help people. Yeah. I can't help it. It's just ingrained in me. And if I know that I'm doing that, I'm like, oh, that's the best feeling in the world.
You feel touched, like you have your purpose. You're living, your legacy, like what you're meant to do.
Because I needed it when I was a kid, right? Like, I remember hearing songs and going, oh my God, I feel exactly that way. I'm not the only one. Holy shit. So who else is there that feels this way? And that's the spark that will just keep you going forever. There's so much more to discover. There's so much wisdom to discover from people. The narrow-sightedness that's imparted on us through mainstream society is so detrimental to our health, and realizing that we can connect with people on a whole other level through art and through music. That's the buzz, man.
It's so important to, when we are sort of put in this position to be able to help others, unknowingly, we also don't realize we've slowly evolved into the person that we needed ourselves.
Oh, I like that. That's great. That's profound. Yeah.
Just think about it. Probably wherever you felt maybe
Totally.
perhaps a void in your life, or just like you just said, you kind of like looked out somewhere. You probably, revisited a childhood memory, but you're thinking back like, man, I wish I had this, or this person was there, or if I knew this. There's always going back, because that is sort of how we gauge. And we always tend to go back, not to what we had. Sometimes we go back to what we didn't have. And then if we look at where we are today, we tend to actually sort of embody that. We're like, fuck, like I am that person that I needed. I wish I could transport myself back to my child self.
That's profound, dude. That's profound. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, it's funny. DMT. I used to resist. Yeah, right.
Imagine one day.
I used to resist the whole like people look up to me as a role model thing. I never liked that, but as I've gotten older, I'm like what you just said. Like, yeah, there are things about me that I, as a kid, would have looked at somebody and been like, wow, that's really cool that they think that way. Case in point, Joe Strummer from The Clash. I remember watching a documentary on him. I think it was West Way to the World. Look it up. It's Joe Strummer. It's about Joe Strummer, not just The Clash. And there's a scene in that documentary where he's out flyering for his new band, the Mascaleros. This is post Clash. Clash just kind of came and went. And there's that younger generation that has no idea who this guy is. Like, he's a superstar at one point, and to me, a hero. And he's there flying for his shows and meeting people who have no idea who he is. And still has that curiosity and that desire and that buzz. He's not a pompous rock star like I did this and I did that. He wants to reconnect with the younger generation. And in that same documentary, he even goes to like an EDM festival. And he's like, what makes the kids, like, it was punk, now what is it?
Yeah.
And he submerges himself into that culture, and to see the look on his face, and he has this aha moment of like, the kids are still all right. They still found something through this community. And I remember watching a documentary and going, that's the way to be. As I get older, I'm not, the kids are doing this, I don't care. I'm actively listening to newer bands. I'm actively checking out the messages. I want to know what makes the younger generation tick. And I think that comes with older age. Like, I still give a shit.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that is something that I would have, as a kid, liked to see as a role model. And I am that person. And it has a lot to do with Joe Strummer. That's why he's on my arm. Love that guy. Rest in peace.
Congratulations to everything that you've had to go through to also, evolve into that person that you once needed yourself, because there's a lot of inner work. Obviously, not enough time, I'm sure, to ever go deep into what it takes, but there's a lot of inner work and, self things that you kind of go through, a lot of like having those inner conversations with your past demons to get to where we are today. So, I'm very happy to see that you're in this position now, because I could tell just by, just your energy and the way your eyes light up when you talk about this. There's this energy that comes out when you talk about, helping others, and just this gratitude that comes with knowing that you make a change, a positive one. I could just tell just by your energy, like, you light up, and that's important too. It's a work. To want to give a shit about people.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and I think I aspire to continue to evolve, and I know I'm going to, and I love that. That's exciting to me. That's what keeps me going, again, back to that purpose, but knowing that I'm going to continue to grow and change. And I think people, as they get older, the whole saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Yes, you can. If the dog is willing, if the dog is willing, you can. I mean, I got healthy. I was going down the road of like, drinking a bottle of tequila a day, eating tons of red meat. My blood pressure was through the roof. I had heart issues. I was quote unquote precancerous, which I know people might chuckle at. We're all kind of precancerous if you think about it, but I knew that my body was not in a good place. I was getting rashes. I was like really bad. And I decided to take my health into my own hands and change. Like, what do I have to change here? So it wasn't even just about the mind, it's the body. And I think a lot of people don't realize they're interconnected.
Yeah.
If your body isn't right, your mind isn't going to be right. You know, I lost a ton of weight. I changed the way that I eat. I'm very careful. I eat predominantly organic, mostly plant-based with some seafood, but everybody's different. Every body is different. You know, how we function and what sits with us well and what our bodies don't really like. When you start to learn that type of stuff as well, that's another sort of revolutionary thought of like, your body is a temple. And if you're putting good things in it that make your cells light up and your brain light up, it's going to change your mind as well. And I think that's something as I've gotten older, especially in the past 5 years, my fiance Purple, she was kind of like the taskmaster when I met her. She said to me, if you eat meat, you need to brush and floss before you kiss me. And it was funny. It was like, that was just enough to nudge me over maybe I'll just start taking that a little more seriously. And since that time, I lost tons of weight. I feel better. I have more clarity of mind. I slimmed down. Like I feel like I'm back in my 20s again, in my 40s. And that is interconnected to my mental state of mind. And I think can't be neglected when you're talking about growth and mental health and all that. The body and the diet and what you're putting in your body needs to be incorporated into that conversation.
And they all have to be, they all have to work together. You know, you can't be incongruent in one area and then, only want better for your mind, only want better for your body.
Yeah.
They're all, like you said, interconnected,
If you're eating McDonald's and you're wondering why you feel like shit, rethink.
You said there's also a difference between mind and body, but the body is a mind in of itself. The body has a brain that's separate from your actual physical brain.
Yeah, your stomach will speak to you.
Yeah,
it's your second brain.
Muscle memory, exactly. There's nerve endings. Like your body without its brain has a brain of its own. There's also why there's body trauma, there's brain trauma, and there's emotional trauma.
Right.
And you could heal from the other two, but yet why does your body always have this like tenseness to it? It's because it has its own brain that still needs work as well, but you're not giving it that, you're not feeding it right. You're not treating it well for it to heal from this constant,
the neurological damage. There's a great book I started to read called The Body Keeps Score, and it's about PTSD. It's about how the body reacts and, tie it into diet, but also relearning how to take your brain and it can't, I think they call it neuroplasticity. Yeah. It's like the brain doesn't have to stay stuck. You can unstick it. There's many ways to do that. And that's fascinating as well. Like learning how to undo. You're not going to get rid of it, but you can undo some of the effects of trauma and PTSD. Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. But I have found through diet and exercise, you can start to do that as well. But it's inner work too, that everybody's different depending on how bad your trauma.
Work as well. People say that they want better for themselves, but they just kind of sitting in the same seat of, victimhood and don't get up and actually do the work. It's not going to be easy.
It's waiting for someone to save you. And there's a lyric on the new Killswitch record is stop waiting for a synthetic savior. Like you got to do it. Like there's only so much, and I get it. People who want to pray and God does work through us, but you can't just sit and pray and not do anything. It's the whole thing that people get frustrated when they hear thoughts and prayers after a school shooting. Like, well, what can you do in your community? You got to start talking to people, and then not on that topic. It's like, it's about being a good parent and raising good children. It's about recognizing when your child is troubled, doing that work too, instead of just waiting for the government to put a new law to like fix this thing. Because guess what? New laws aren't going to fix anything. People are still going to be crazy and messed up. So you have to be active. You can't just rely on spirituality and God. You need to coexist with your actions. And that starts on a very small level. Something as little as opening that door and you see your neighbor, and instead of just like, ugh, you're like, eye contact, good morning, hello. Little teeny things like that on a regular basis, you'll see a ripple effect. That is, as foolish as that might sound to some people, the profoundness of simple acts of kindness, that ripple effect. You have no idea what you might have done for that neighbor when you just said hello and you were nice, and they're like, they take a deeper breath and then they have a better day. And guess what? They might do like that. You don't know how that will affect. And I think of that all the time. When I'm not doing well, or I'm in a weird spot, that love bubbles up, and I'm like, I'm going to be nice to someone right now and see what happens. And it's beautiful. You never know. And it could change your life. Little teeny things like that.
Yeah, it's like we're slowly, de-evolutionizing, the chart with the apes to humans. We're going in reverse. And we're being
we're going down to our cell phones.
Exactly. We're shaping our
crouching,
recreating our spinal structure.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we're relearning how to be human again. Because where we are now in the state of society and the state of, today's world, we're slowly not human. We're slowly kind of getting away from that. So it all starts with not one, not two, with many people together, learning how to human again.
Well, it's the disconnect, right? Of like texting, emailing, having arguments where you're not even seeing the person, losing track of body language. When you're in a crowded room or even on the subway, this is a great example in the New York City subway. And if you don't have your phone with you and you're up and you're looking around, most people are like monks to the scripture with their phone. They're in it. Yeah. You're missing social cues. You're missing survival things. There could be somebody on the train that is going to harm you, but you wouldn't know it because you're not paying attention. And I think that trickles through life, through relationships, eye contact, watching someone's body movement. Because that person can say one thing. That person can say, I love you. But if you watch their face, you watch their body, ooh, they're tricking you. But you wouldn't know it unless you were able to study the face. And we've lost touch with each other. And like you said, humanizing ourselves, like that is an element that is crucial, and why I do believe there was so much more conflict and arguing and anger and hatred, because we were losing touch with the cellular level. I mean, even the way somebody smells, it sounds funny, but the scent of somebody's pheromones and the way that something that they give off, you can meet somebody and not like them and have no idea why. It's because your animalistic scent is picking up on a pheromone, and that pheromone is giving you an untruth. And that sounds wild, but do your research. It's true. Which is also why you can meet somebody and be like, I really like this person. I'm not sure why. They just seem like a really good person. And you've only known them for like 5 minutes, but your arms are like, you get goosebumps. Like, I really like this person. You're picking up on senses that you can't get through a phone or an email or a phone call. You got to be face to face in the room with people to see that. And as I've traveled, I've noticed that more and more. I'm a pretty good judge of character. When I meet you, I can go, bullshit.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm good. Or like, oh, that's a good person.
It's funny how the body knows before the brain even knows. Like the
gut
body
instinct.
It's
true.
Physiological.
Or street smarts.
Yeah,
you can spot a sucker from a block away.
Yeah, it's just literally smell them. You're like, shit, like he's up to no good, or you just get the sense of knowing. You're very spot on with that. It's a funny story with I've told a lot of friends who don't fight or compete. Only fighters would know this. People in the sport. You could blindfold me and take me without knowing where I'm going. Take me to a back room where all the fighters are before we go out and fight. I'll probably 9 out of 10 times, maybe 10 out of 10 times, tell you that we are in the back room before a fight just by the smell, because there's this aroma of fear. There's this smell. All fighters, I mean, first of all, it literally smells like shit, because we're shitting ourselves, pissing ourselves. People glamorize what they see on TV, and it's a spectacle to watch, but what they don't see is the back room, the nerves, the fear, the puking, the crying, the shitting, the pissing, all of that. That's why I say there is a smell that we are very distinct to one another, whether it's good and or bad, that bad vibe, that bad energy. There's also physiological interactions that we have before we even say a word.
Right. And you could say the same thing about this and strip clubs or BDSM nights. If you go to them, there's a smell to that too, that weird pheromone of like sexual energy. And some people love it and get off on it, and some people are like, ooh, that's just weird, it's creepy. The humans give off these things. And again, we've just lost touch with it. And I think it's important to reestablish that as connection. It's not just about words and intents. It's about the all-encompassing energy of a human being. It's fascinating to me. The more I learn about it, the more I'm fascinated by it. Yeah. The wonderment of why people are the way that they are. And again, gut instinct, this is a brain as well. This is a brain as well. It's all our senses. It's everything. And then that other sense, that spiritual sense, is important as well.
Well, the fact that you have this curiosity to wanting to know these things, these things, it's available, and it's not knowledge that is only limited to select few. You know, back in time ago, for example, like the Bible and certain scriptures were only allowed to a certain class of people. Like,
yes.
but now it's anybody. You could literally be, you know, born and then just raised a certain way by the education that's literally in, you know, at your fingertips, or just the desire to want to know more. And if you have general curiosity about humans, about psychology, I'm big on that. I'm big on, I mean, in my sport, I also kind of have to be in, you know, in the know of like physical language and stuff.
You have to size people up when you fight them too.
Oh yeah, like there's that. I teach for a living as well, so I have to, when a prospect walks in, a potential student comes into the school, I can identify if they're timid, if they're shy, if they're coming in like,
or they're
chips
cocky
on their shoulders. Oh, I
gotta break that fool.
We'll break them down. You know, these are all like cues that it's at anyone's disposal, but at the end of the day, you have to have that wonderment. You have to want to be curious enough, or just give a shit enough to want to know about other people. Because the more you learn about people too, guess what? You're better equipped as a father, as a brother, as a son, whatever role you play in your unit, you become a better human for that. You become better at that role.
And I've got to assume as a teacher too, you've probably learned your craft so much more when you teach it. You know, I can't even imagine. You've kind of have to like think about what you do in a completely different sense, because you're trying to explain to somebody who hasn't been in your shoes, who hasn't been in the ring, who doesn't know this technique. To teach that must be mind-blowing.
So I'm teaching, I have students who are higher ranks who I'm training them to train others. You know, it's an instructorship.
I love that. Wow.
It's an instructorship program. I think they're probably a little surprised to know how much, or rather how little, I'm actually going over the technique of how to teach versus the psychology of how to teach.
Dig it.
I've been more in the classes that I teach with them talking about, like, you know, picking up on body language, what to say, negative verbiage. When you talk, don't talk about what not to do. Talk about the positive.
Yeah.
Give everyone, don't give, you know, these big goals to, you know, overcome. Just give them little bits. Each time you teach them, you're selling them on the next class. You're letting them know that this is something they can do. Human adversity, because everyone comes in just by nature. We always have a state of natural distrust for one another, because you cannot walk from one corner in New York City to another corner without being sold something, whether subliminally, whether it's through logos or someone on the street just handing you flyers. So we're constantly literally walking from block to block, accumulating these slow series of distrusting each other and putting up this natural guard. So by the time they show up to the school, it's trying to get them to, okay, A, I can do this. B, I trust you. And C, you're helping me to feel and get in touch with a side of me I never knew I had.
Wow, that's profound. I don't think a lot of people probably realize that's what goes into it. And that's when you know you're good at what you do, man. That's really cool to look at it that way. And you're absolutely right. I see that even with fans that I meet, you know, after a show, you can see the people who are damaged. You can see the people who are eager to connect. And that's been one of the most powerful things for me as an artist, is meeting those people, just like you meet your students or the people that you're passing on that wisdom to somebody else. Because it's not just knowledge, like you said, it's not just technique. It's like what you're talking about is experience. You know, the psychology of it is experience. It's not just something you write on a piece of paper. Yeah. It's something that you have to live in and embody. And I think the same thing goes with music and art. If you're just putting out art and not meeting your audience, or not even, you know, not performing it, you're not getting the whole picture of what you're doing. And I think that's super important. The effect and the impact that you're having on people. And that, again, ties back to what we're talking about with body language and all that stuff. It's profound. And that's the stuff of life. And I'll continue to write about that and talk about that, because I think it all ties back into mental health. It all ties back into community. It all ties back into the fact that we do need each other. We got to look out for each other. So somebody who's got a little more strength and a little more wisdom needs to look after that person who is damaged, who does come in with the hunched shoulders and trust issues. Like, that's something we have to all work on it. And as you get older, you know, that's what we're called upon to do. You know, you reach that stage in your life where it's not just about you. You have to start giving back. You have to, because if the things that you've learned along the way can be game changers for somebody else.
So I say the richest place in this world is a cemetery, because in that field, you know, of the people who have passed, lies so much potential buried that people don't, during their time being awake, do not share with others or pass on to others. A lot of people take, they keep, and get buried.
Yeah.
And there lies the most richest place on the planet is any cemetery you walk into. So much potential that has not seen the day of light or shared with someone who may need it for them to not kill themselves or do something terrible, or become a bad person and hurt other people, because hurt people hurt people.
Yes, that is true.
As someone who you openly talk about and discuss, struggles about mental health, how do you approach using your platform, meaning whether it's social media, being on stage, just your power, your presence, and what you have in your skill set to help raise awareness and reduce the stigma around mental health issues?
I think for me, it's become sort of simple. I mean, it used to be a lot more profound, I think, with the podcast, Stoke the Fire, but that's sort of been on a hiatus because both Matt and I are very busy. So that was definitely a huge part of giving back and sort of addressing that. But, I've withdrew a little bit from social media. I've had these moments where I just need to, especially while writing a record. That's another thing I have to say is while I'm writing a record, it is very difficult to continue to give to people through social media. But I can't help it. I still have these moments. I've got a couple of posts on my Instagram where I'm driving my truck and I'm just like, shit, I got something to say. Like, turn the camera around, press play, drive, not even looking at the camera, just, I got to say this. I can't fucking not. And it's a knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes I'm not even planning it. I have this thought of like, wow, that's profound. Someone else needs to know that. So it's not even like I'm sitting there plotting and scheming and going, this is how I can help people. Sometimes it's like, wherever you want to call it, God, or whatever, it's like, hey, what about this? And I'm like, oh shit, I got to share that. And I'll do that and I'll see the messages. I'll see the comments. And I'm like, oh, I guess that was worth it. So it's I can't help it, man. I got my mother's spirit is in me, and she's a nurse, been a nurse for like longer than I can remember. And that's just a part of my DNA. It's a knee-jerk thing. Like, this thing might help somebody, so I've got to say it. So I'll put it on social media.
To the viewers out there who follow Jesse, go over to his social media, and what you'll see is kind of exactly that. It's the way you described it's funny because you go through, whether it's your stories or what you do post, because I follow and I watch, seems to be a very interpersonal moment that you have in the moment. It's not something that seems like it's planned out. You're just like, it seems like there's just something like, man, I gotta hold on. Then you get out there and you start talking while you're in wilderness. You're sharing recordings of you just walking. You're out on a hike, or like you said, you're driving. Or there's just these moments that stick out to you that you're like, hold on, no, get my phone, and then you just talk, but it's very organic. And I think that being shared balances out something that is the other side of it, which is your career. Your career is so powerful, it speaks for itself. You sharing these very honest moments that's not curated and formatted and looks pretty and beautiful on social media is where it's at, I think. Because people see that, they're like, this dude, as much as he's this fucking like badass heavy metal musician, they know that side about you. But to then balance it out with this other side that you just have these moments that are honest and raw and rare, I think is what gives people a better understanding of you as a human being too.
I think it's important for me, the rock star mythos. I've never liked it. I've never liked people calling me a rock star. I accept it now because that's what people think I am. But you've got people who don't show you the third wall. They don't pull that down. They keep you out. And the rock star mythos is cool. Like, can you imagine Lemmy from Motorhead being on social media going like, hey guys, what's going on? I've got this recipe to share with you. You're like, it doesn't really fit the mold. Sometimes rock stars need to be rock stars. And I mentioned Lemmy because to me, after he passed, there's no more rock stars. They're all dead. And I don't have to do those things, right? I don't have to do it. You're right. I could just rest on my laurels and be the guy from Killswitch. And my post is about my tour and that's it.
Yeah.
And I've even had in the past people advise me, hey, do less of that personal stuff because it makes you look weak. It makes you look this. It makes you look that.
Yeah.
And I remember an exact moment in my life when I was like, bullshit. I need to tell people right now. And that's where this song came from. I'm broken too. where I started to talk about I'm fucked up. You guys think I'm this positive guy that wrote, these anthems from Alive Which Is Breathing, but like there's more to me than that. And I felt the need to just tell people I'm going through something right now. And it was a post. I was in my bathroom in Yonkers years ago, and I turned the camera around and I'm in my bathroom. I think it's not on social media anymore, but I started to tell people I was suicidal and in a really fucking dark place. And it was that moment where I realized that I'm not just a guy in a band. I need to show that human side because there's power in that. And it's not power to make money or monetize it or forward my career. It was power to like take the, like you said, the rock star thing and the human me and sort of draw a line between the two.
Yeah.
So people could see it's not what you think. Just like if you were to follow me around on tour, going backstage and seeing what we do, most people would be like, that's a bummer. That's boring. It's not as cool as you think it is. And the same thing with my life. Like, it's not as glamorous as you think it is. And I think it's important to show that other side.
Yeah.
Because people can relate to it. And you'll look at my lyrics and my songs in a different way when you start to get to know that other side of me. But I'm guarded enough where I don't overshare. At least I try not to overshare. I'll go out and put the little bits of advice, but I'm not bringing it into my home and, oversharing. I think there's a fine line with that. But again, I can't help it.
It's funny because I mentioned earlier that a year from today, this month, February from last year, I was in your podcast and I had the opportunity to talk. And I guess you kind of helped me in a sense. Matt, who's there also, you both, in that experience of being there, helped me to also realize what's on your elbow, what you wrote, that I am broken too. And that I don't have to continue this avatar and play this character just for the sake of letting other people know that I am okay, when in reality I am not okay. And that it is okay to actually share and let people know, at least open the curtains enough to see that there's darkness behind those curtains.
Yeah.
And through that, I feel people resonate and connect more to the broken than someone who's, impossibly hard to try to, match or
right.
try to,
the mythos of the human being, the fighter, the rock star, the mythos that I think can turn people off. I'll never be like that. And then when you realize you get something in common with someone like you or someone like me, it opens up possibilities and it brings connection and comfort to people too. And it's been amazing to watch your journey and to see, the revolution that's happened inside of your brain since that day. And it happened pretty quickly, at least for me, from social media, going like, wow, he's really starting to talk about this shit now. It went from you being like, to like, all right, we got to talk about this. And then to what you're doing right now. It's awesome. Yeah, now I'm proud of you, man. It's cool.
Thank you.
And you're helping people, and that's important. It's super important. And I know that this is probably just the beginning for you.
I think, I'm just trying to live up to my last name at the end of the day, but to let people know that I'm quite the opposite of that. I'm not always good. I've not always been a good person. I've been bad. I've been on the other side of that. And each day, if we could all just try to live our lives to slowly, incrementally, try to just be a better person each day, even by the tiniest bit, I think this place could just overall be a better place for everyone.
That's right, brother. Amen.
One of the things I want to bring up too, so your music your music during that time, now that we've kind of opened up that channel, a lot of it lyrically helped me as well during that time. That's to kind of illustrate the power of, music, of being able to relate to other people and other things. Because it touches us all in our own unique ways. It resonates to us in a way that people create mantras in life, and with them they even tattoo it on their own bodies as inspiration. I found out one of my buddies here, Mike or Ray, said they know someone that has one of your lyrics tattooed on their arm. What does your line, "This body is only a shell," mean to you?
That speaks on the existential level of, we think we're only the physical form, but you could even just say energy. It doesn't even have to just spiritually, on a scientific level, energy, it can't be created or destroyed. So we are all energetically something other than our bodies, or spiritually, depending on how you want to word it. And I think it's important for people to know that this is just an illusion, really. It's really an illusion for what is inside of us. And I believe that the soul doesn't die. I truly don't believe death is the end. I think it's a doorway. And this is a belief. Obviously, I couldn't tell you that it is true. And anyone who says they know the truth no matter what, be wary of people like that. Nobody knows the absolute truth of life and death. We can assume, we can believe, we can have faith, which is important. But in that unknowing, circling back to what you said earlier, maybe an hour ago, I don't know, but in that unknowing, to me, there is peace, because somebody can't tell me this is what's going to happen. And I'm like, shit, that's what's going to happen. How do you know? Because I have faith. Cool. That's great. Kudos to you for your faith. I love that. But to me, I don't accept it. And I love the idea of not knowing. And we are much greater than our bodies. There's something much greater inside of us that continues on with or without this body. And I think it's important. And I put that in a lot of my lyrics, talking about the spirit, the soul, that it doesn't die off when we're put in the ground. There's no way. There's more to it. And I think the fluidity of our soul, when people always talk about this, and always is about that as well, it's like your ancestors aren't in some weird pearly gate place that you don't have touch with them. They're amongst you. Our ancestors are people we love. Your mom who passed away, she's present with you. If you had some kind of a connection in a relationship, they don't leave. They're here somewhere. They're influencing you. They're smiling on you. They're prodding and pushing, and it's so much bigger than people realize. And it's not just from a religious context. Again, energy can't be created or destroyed. So what happens to the energy in our bodies? It continues on.
It's like rebirth.
It is. Every day is rebirth. Think about it. Nas said it, sleep is the cousin of death. So like every night you die a little bit, and then every morning you're reborn. So we do it daily. That's why almost every morning, I've been slacking a little bit. Every morning when I first wake up, I'm like, thank you. Here I am again. What do we, if you start your day with gratitude every day, make that your mantra, watch your life change. And then start manifesting, Today I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. In my life, I'm going to do this. If you manifest that, people call it prayer. People call it manifesting. Whatever it is, do that. Start the day with gratitude, and then manifest what you're going to do. And not what I want to do, what you're going to do. And watch your life change. That's all part of the spirit and the energy, that power that we have to cast spells and to have answered prayers or to manifest. All that stuff is so powerful.
A habit I developed, I got this idea from Bedros Keuilian. He's an entrepreneur. Part of his circle now has been helping me on different levels. He sends out gratitude messages, and since then I've adopted that thing where in the mornings I'll, as much as I can remember to, or have the time to meditate. I've been slacking myself as well. It's a reminder to get back.
Same.
I'll write 3 gratitude messages a day. Random, doesn't matter, whether social media, in person. You'd be surprised to know how much just our act of randomness, the random kindness, just by saying, hey, thank you for always being a good friend, being there for me, blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, just wanted to say thank you for what you do, or whatever. In whatever context it means to you and that person, just send a message that says thank you. 3 messages in the morning. And one is that in our world, we know what we're doing. In another person's world, the recipient of that gratitude might have been having a very shit day. Or they wake up first thing in the morning and they're like in a place that's not a good place. They're not waking up to a good head, and they're in a very dark time in their life, whatever, They see that message and they're like, wow, like, you know what? It just snaps things into perspective, and it makes someone realize too that someone's randomly thinking about them, and it kind of puts them in a good place. At worst is that you might get a message back later when you're having a shit day, and then you know, whatever you're going through, and then you get a message, and then a person writes something very profound back to you. It's like, hey, you know, thank you for that message, meant a lot. And then they might write something back to you that like snaps you out of it as well. And that's why gratitude, that's just proof that gratitude is contagious. But also the gratitude is not only an act, it's a gift to yourself. It's also for the recipient, because people like to be seen. And I think gratitude is another version of someone being seen in this world. Like, wow, like someone wakes up first thing in the morning, thinks about me, and is grateful that, you know, I do X, Y, and Z, whatever.
That's beautiful.
So that's something that I started to adopt into, you know, my everyday, send out gratitude messages.
Love it. I love it. Do that. Whoever's listening, do it.
And we talked about Rebirth. So you just recently wrapped up, you know, the vocals for your new Kill Switch Engage album coming up.
Yep.
And on your most recent posts, as of today's date, you elaborated beautifully on how you hung up the headphones and you turned the mic off. You described the process of the headspace that you were in and how it felt like a rebirth. Can you dive a little deeper into that?
Whew. Got another hour? I learned a lot about myself, and a lot of it was ego death, letting go of my creations. You know, when I'm handed a piece of music and I write to it, it's not casual. I never write a casual song. There's no such thing. So writing all this intense stuff, and then as I was gaining momentum, the rest of the guys in my band were like, nah, I don't like that one. You can do better than that. I don't like that one. And it was like a lot, more than anything in my whole career, like literally like 5 or 6 songs, and everyone was like, not feeling this. It's not, you can do better. And some of it felt negative, and then Adam, who's, you know, my musical soulmate, he kept saying that. I was like, I think you can do better. Rethink of it this way. So it forced me, especially, and I think this is important as I get older, and I've been doing this long enough, you have to sort of reinvent yourself enough to bring a fresh perspective into something. You can't take it for granted that people are just going to buy the Kill Switch record and they're going to like what I do. It was really challenging for me, to the point where and you know, this is exclusive and I'm not going to talk about it a ton, but I thought I was done. I was like, I'm not good anymore. I can't do this. And that feeling I'd never really had before. I mean, when I had my vocal surgery in 2018, I touched on it in my brain, thinking I wouldn't be able to do this again because of a physical thing. But this time around, it was like, is my creativity gone? Is my gift of word gone? And that was hard for me to really take a good hard look at myself. So I took my approach and I changed it, and I came from a completely different angle. And the lyrics, I'm saying words and adjectives and themes on here that I've said before, but I'm saying them in a completely different way where it feels fresh to me. And then all of a sudden it started to light up with the band, and the band's like, oh, there it is. That's good. And it was almost like I had to stop midway through this whole record and do a retake of like all this stuff. And it was a good, like, I remember walking out in the mountains and just thinking to myself, like, shit, I might be out of a job. I might not have anything left. But from that feeling, everything changed, and I felt a sense of humility. Then I felt a sense of empowerment through it. And I think lyrically, the themes that I touch upon are things that I have had pent up in me. I know, I'm not going to say I think. During the pandemic, I lost a part of myself, my voice, that passionate voice of dissent against the powers that be. I quelled myself and I was quiet because the air of society was so volatile that if you said something wrong, people's anger would come at you. It doesn't matter what you'd say. Like if you didn't agree with column A or column B, you sat in the middle and were like, that's fucked up, that's fucked up. You're going to get attacked. So I lost my voice. I lost my passion. So when I went to start writing this record, I didn't realize how much PTSD I had from that time frame, because most of what I've been saying in my lyrics are self-empowerment, you know, anti-authority, like all these things, that revolutionary punk rock thing where you had to be really careful during that time to not say the wrong thing. And some people will go on tirades and say this, this, and this. Some people go on tirades, this, this, this. And I'm like, I'm neither of those people. Who am I? I just want there to be, a common ground for all of us to stand on. So through that process, a part of me sort of died. And what became reborn in me was the new voice that does encompass all of those things that I was afraid to say, where I realized there's wisdom in saying it in such a way where you're not creating more division. You're able to speak your truth without making someone feel less than for not agreeing with this point of view. So writing it in a sort of very poetic way where I could empower somebody to think for themselves and maybe create change. So there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of themes that I think would have been relevant during the pandemic to wake people up, but didn't feel appropriate at the time. So now that we're past it, we're in the aftermath of what happened and we're rebuilding and healing and being reborn. These are the anthems for that. And I can honestly say I'm super proud of it. And I think I did it in such a way where it is going to inspire people and not create division, regardless of what you thought or think. It's about the greater good of all of us.
That's amazing. It honestly sounds like it encompasses just that, how you're saying rebirth. But I also feel strongly, connected to the idea that we have to disconnect our idea of who we think we are in order for that to be possible. Because when you just say, all right, well, this is who I am, this is what I'm used to doing, this is my identity, this has always been me. There's never that sense of creation, and we were talking earlier before is, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Absolutely. And it comes with the notion of first letting go, dying, killing the old you, or letting parts of that at least die and just, pass on so that there's room for a rebirth of something new. You can't change if you're always stuck to the identity of, who you think you are. And I think sometimes it takes scrutiny, it takes pressure, it takes someone being like, yo, like it's not working, it's not good, or, you're not doing good enough, or because that's just another way of saying that people see this potential in you that you're not seeing for yourself because you're just stuck to this old you, the old Jesse.
Yes. And I think that you got to get out of your own way sometimes too. And I was definitely in my own way and living in my comfort zone and not realizing that I was, and that was huge for me. And now I'm grateful for it. At the time, I was definitely annoyed and like feeling like, wow, I thought these guys were my friends, and like it has nothing to do with that. And I got to say this too. There was a book put out by Rick Rubin, a very brilliant music producer, and he's also got a podcast, which I highly recommend. But he talks about music, the song being its own thing. So as personal as my songs are, as much as I put myself into them, at the end of the day, it's a song. So the criticism of that song isn't necessarily criticism of me as a person. It's just criticism of the art that I created. So he said it in such a way where I just had this click, and it was around that time where I was like, can I still do this? And allowing myself to destroy things I've created, to take these songs that I was like, this is a good song, and go in the trash, get rid of it. There was a real profundity in that. And now that has happened, I know moving forward with my art and my music, I'm going to be able to do that easier, which I think is going to lead to better songs, to better stuff. And that's a real thing I struggled with. And I'm sure a lot of artists feel that way. Your art is like, it's precious to you. But again, going back to what I said earlier, once you're done with it, it's not yours. So there is a thought of, and you could do this even with teaching, where it's not about you anymore. It's about what you've done and the energy that you've created that goes on without you. And that was huge for me. It was very humbling. The ego death is what I could say. And that's important as an artist, to let go and to be open to confrontation as well. And I think in my life, I've skirked away from confrontation when I was younger due to various PTSD elements. But the more you're in conflict, the more you grow. You can't, they call it growing pains. That's true. You need to go through pain. You need to sit with your pain in order for you to grow. And that process definitely happened while making this record.
You also get gratitude and appreciation to your fiance, Purple, and you talk about how you had her support during this process as well, and you were sharing a lot of gratitude towards her during that period. Talk to us about how important it is to have a strong person by our side to kind of ride with us throughout our worst whenever we become, that other person that we had to become to do what we do.
Yeah, there's been moments with her. Thankfully, I've gotten stronger as a man and as a human, but there's been moments where she pulled me up from the depths, and there are moments when she doesn't let me wallow in self-pity for too long, and she reminds me of who I actually am, and reminds me of the legacy, of what I've created, and I forget that. Again, with humility sometimes comes insecurity, where I get that imposter syndrome thing that creeps up in me, and she doesn't allow that to stay. And I love that about her. There are times when I get really frustrated with her because I just want to be coddled and like told it's going to be okay, which she does too. But very quickly from it's going to be okay, she'll flip it into like, we'll do something about it, knock it off. She won't let me stay wallowing for too long. And that's important. And during this album cycle, writing this record, there were days, like 2 or 3 days in a row, where I had a hard time functioning. I'd get out of bed to go to the bathroom and get a snack and then go right back in bed and just couldn't do anything different. I just was crashing. But she's always there to either gently or not gently, depending on what the situation calls for, to just remind me of who I am. And that's it. She's a strong partner, and I love her for that. She's a badass.
It's important to have someone who's a, right-hand woman who's
Yeah.
just, strong and keeps us honest at the end of the day too. Helps us to kind of really keep our focus, because us, when we're doing what we do, we lose sight of that.
Absolutely.
Often.
And she's also helped me be, I'm a recovering people pleaser of learning how to say no to people, to respect my own boundaries. And that's something that I've always struggled with, just wanting to make everybody feel okay at the cost of myself. So that's another thing that she's really helped me see, is like, I got to stop saying yes to all these people and letting people take advantage of me, because it's been a huge thing in my life. So that's been awesome and difficult, is learning how to not be a people pleaser and tell people no and say that I don't like this, I don't appreciate that, I don't agree with this. Like, those are things that I've never been good at, that I'm getting better at.
It almost feels like it's like you trying to work against your own nature.
Right.
I can relate to that. Mika, has really been there and extremely supportive. She's been supportive in a way where she's literally like the passenger in, the chaos of what I was going through during that time, even up to a year ago when I was on your podcast, but knew when to jump in and be like, no, this is not, you're better than this. And times where she'd step back and let the chaos unfold, knowing that, there's dangers to it, and trusting as well, because she had to trust me in the midst of all that, and knowing like, shit, if I completely let go and let him do what he needs to, and God forbid something terrible happens, that's on me. So there's a lot of trust. I think that also goes into what our partners do to know when to, put the foot on the gas pedal and when to hit the brakes,
Right.
and to keep us honest, so.
Yeah, trust is a huge thing, and yeah, allowing somebody to make mistakes too is important. You can't rescue everybody from everything. And I think Purple and I have realized that too. I even wrote a song called Rescue about her on the last Times of Grace record. And as much as that rings true, there's a part of it where you've got to realize you can't rescue somebody. You got to help them rescue themselves. And I think that's been a huge, profound lesson, just even in the past year, of learning how to allow someone to do the work, to be there for them, but you can't do the work for them. They have to do the work.
What life advice would you give to someone struggling through their own inner darkness and looking for a way to get through the other side of it?
Number one, speak up. That's the first step. Speak up, ask for help, talk about it. And then you'll start to gain tools and wisdom from other people where you can sort of do the work on your own. But I think, as we said earlier, it's twofold. You need your community, and you need to do the work on by yourself. But oftentimes the first step is seeking help and saying that you need help, because no one can read your mind. No one's just going to come in and rescue you. You got to say it. You got to speak it. And once you speak it into being and you say it, that you're not okay, everything else will start to happen naturally. And that's when you develop the tools and the weapons and the mindset of how to heal yourself. But you need help.
Community is so powerful, and I think that is one of the things that helps others, get through things. It did for me. As I said before, one of the things that first started this journey of healing for me was just first self-acknowledgement, is understanding like, all right, this that's on my face, on my psyche that I'm wearing is not who I am. I am separate from that. And then what you said is asking for help. I had a very hard time doing that, in the beginning. And I think a lot of people also struggle with that as well, is either knowing how to ask for help, who to ask for help, or to overcome this, I guess, ego or a side of them that feels like if they ask for help, they would be seen a certain way.
That stigma that's still there when it comes to, mental health. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It takes bravery. It really does. But, in that bravery, in that conversation, in the long run, not only are you saving yourself and healing yourself, but in turn, you're going to eventually turn that around and heal other people by sharing your story and by speaking up. I mean, which is very much what you're doing now. And I love that. It's full circle. It's not a one-way street. It's reciprocal. It goes back and forth.
When you learn to solve your own problems and to heal yourself, you become very skilled at being able to help others too. So your duty is twofold. When you are trying to work on yourself, you're also working on the possibilities of the others that you have an opportunity to help too. So it's almost selfish in a way, if you think about it, to not try to fix and heal yourself, because you, when you overcome yours and what you're struggling through, will become this person that someone else may need or will need, because you yourself are someone that you needed. That's why you became who you are today.
And I think that that's tied to fear. I think people who look at other people who are being vulnerable as a weakness, that's their fear of how people see them. And I think fear is the thing that keeps people closed off. And fear is the thing that drives people to not speak up and to not seek help. And the bravery that it takes and the strength that it takes to speak up should be commended. And we need to flip that conversation. We need to change that narrative to show that vulnerability is actually strength. And if you're not doing, like you said, selfishness, but also fear, you're afraid. That's why you're not sharing.
The best gift I think you could give to anybody is the space, that ability to be themselves. And that'll also kind of help with the fear, part that people have, is sometimes people don't feel like they have the space or freedom to be able to actually show themselves. And, having said that, I want to, again, personally thank you for giving me that space and that time, and genuinely and sincerely thankful for the opportunity to see myself and to really look at the man in the mirror and to talk freely about the broken parts of me that I felt I was never allowed to talk about. Because to dive into mental health and to do the work that is necessary, there has to be a sense of, like you said, courage, the sense of feeling like it's okay to do, and that there is, as frightening as it may be, on the other side of it, the version of yourself that is the untapped potential, that is not yet seeing the light of day. That person will be the one to not only help you with all of your problems, but is a person that other people will need in this world. And if we continue to do that on a mass level, I feel like we are very much in a place where we could, make this place a better place in general. Just to be able to just...
It only takes a spark to start a fire, and I think that that day, that conversation was Matt and I passing the torch on to you, and you took it seriously. And as we sit in front of this fire and talk about what we're talking about, that is the aftermath of, in a good way, of being vulnerable and showing your human side and being strong enough and brave enough to do so. And yet, full circle moment right here. And it's funny too, it was about a year ago. It's crazy what can happen in a year, right? Yeah. So here we are, brother. And it's been an honor to be here in your home and to do this, man.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming out.
You got it, brother.
Sharing the wisdom, but more talking about you know, the man behind the microphone, you know, like you said in your post, hanging up the headphones and the mic. But now you step out of that and you hang up the uniform of that person and showing us more about who you are, you know, behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, that, and I'm going to retreat to the woods for a while and shut my phone off.
All right, brother, man. For you guys who are out there, follow Jesse Leach on his Instagram as Jesse Leach.
Yep.
Also, he's stay tuned for the release of his Kill Switch Engage album, right? He just finished writing and producing. We're all excited about that.
Yeah, dude.
And also follow him on Times of Grace. And don't forget, for you guys who are following on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button. If there's anything you find of value for what we spoke about, please share. The power of just sharing stories and helping one another is our duty at the end of the day. So thank you to all you guys for following and watching. And thank you, my man, for
Hell yeah, brother.
today, coming by.
Love it. Thank you.